This is a very special episode of the Lunduke Hour. In fact, this episode is coming out on Friday, April 14th, 2017. And the reason this is special, the reason I'm doing a show on Friday, which I don't normally do, is because I got the opportunity to have a good chat with Richard Stallman, the founder of the Free Software Foundation, the father of the GNU movement, and the man behind the GPL. And when you get those opportunities, you get up early on a Friday morning and you record it. That's just how that works. This is a very fascinating interview. We recorded this earlier today. I didn't want to make Richard sit through me talking and introducing the show and all that sort of thing. So we just record the interview and stitch it in after the fact. Normally, I'm a very lazy man and I don't even edit these shows. I record them all in one go and then spit them out onto the internet. And it's very simple for me. Today, I actually have to edit. It's craziness. So this interview, I'm not even sure exactly how to describe what you're about to watch. So I should say this straight up. Richard Stallman is a smart and borderline brilliant and very determined man. What he wants to talk about are the things he wants to talk about. So interviewing Richard is not the easiest thing in the world. So the strategy I decided to take was we were just going to have a casual conversation, and whenever having a conversation wasn't quite working, I'm just going to let the man talk. Because the reality is, for this episode, certainly, you're not here to see what Brian Lunduke has to say. You're here for Richard Stallman. You're here to listen to Richard Stallman. So I tried to ask him some questions that a lot of you asked me to ask him, and I tried to ask him some of my own, but the reality was he really controlled the conversation. So I just kind of let him go at it, and this was fascinating. So you'll notice there's a lot of background noise. He had a house fan blowing on his laptop to keep it from overheating. I'm not even joking about that. He literally had a house fan pointed on his laptop. I think he brings it up during the interview. So if it's a little loud, just bear with me on it. There's really not much I could have done. At one point during the middle of the interview, his browser just straight up crashed. We start having these connectivity issues, and I'm like, what's going on? It seemed to be working for a moment. Then his browser crashed and he came back. Luckily, it all works out at the end. So there's a couple of rough spots here and there, but just kind of power through it. I'm not going to chop the video up. I kind of wanted to leave it there in all of its glory. That way you can have the whole experience with me the same way I had it. I'm gonna cut off a little bit of the beginning and the end stuff that was more just me and Richard talking to each other, that I don't think was really meant for public consumption as much. But nothing crazy was in there anyway. This was absolutely fascinating. But before we get into that, let's talk about hardware. I mentioned the System 76 Galago Pro earlier this week. This is their new laptop they have coming out, and I've played around with this laptop. And after I talked about it on the show earlier this week, it really hit me. This might be the laptop that I would like to have with me as my ideal carry everywhere laptop. It's not too big, it's not too small. It's got a 13-inch screen, which is about right for me. It's I'm kind of like the sweet spot for me for a portable is around 13 inches. So that way it fits in most bags. It's not too big and clunky. This isn't a very heavy laptop either. So the display is a 1320 by 1080 display. So it's really high resolution in a 13-inch display, which is great. What I decided to do is I decided to spec this out exactly as I would want it. So this is slightly bumped up in a couple of areas. You can get a lower end system than this, but this is how I bumped it up. I bumped it up from the i5, that is the low end of it, up to a 3.5 gigahertz i7, because then, you're getting a nice peppy CPU. 16 gigs of RAM, because that seems about right. You can go all the way up to 32, I believe. 16 gigs is about what I want in my portable machine, because I wouldn't be getting this for my hardcore video editing box, right? This is my bring to conferences with me machine. This is my carry around the house with me machine. This is the, if I'm laying on the couch and I just want to putz around, this is the one I bring with me and put on my lap. That's what I'm thinking for this. So 16 gigs of RAM feels pretty good. It's enough to run a lot of virtual machines. It's enough to do some video editing or some good gaming. But, you know, I probably don't need the full 32 gigs in it. I went with a 250 gig M.2 SSD drive. You can get a whole lot more. In fact, there's an extra hard drive slot, so you can get the M.2 drive right on the board, and you can get also an extra, I think, 2.5-inch drive. So you can crank this up to several terabytes of storage if you want. For me, I just want one SSD, roughly a quarter terabyte will do, so 250 gigs is great. It's got an Intel HD 620 GPU, just fine for what I want this for. And I've mentioned this before, but the thing I love about a good laptop for bringing to conferences is that it has an Ethernet port. That is just so amazingly critical if you're doing demonstrations on a machine, because conference Wi-Fi stinks like 90% of the time. So it's got a nice Ethernet port. It's got HDMI. I believe it's also got a mini display port on it, but I don't use those as much, so it's not as big of a deal. But it's got an HDMI port, an SD card reader, which is important for pulling the pictures off the camera while I'm away and wanting to upload them. It's got two USB 3.1 ports and one USB-C port. Great little laptop, just thin, light, sleek lines. It's just really, really nice looking. So the configuration I put it together for is $1,282. To me, that feels about right. It feels like about what I would expect to pay. So I like it. I think this may end up being the machine I get to just have with me everywhere. You know, it's a nice little rig. And I want to talk to you about this. This is the storage director from Pogo Linux. I've already been talking a little bit about some crazy storage stuff. However, this bad boy might take the cake. This might be the baddest mamma jamma. We'll see what we come up with from them. But they call this the storage director Q4290. It has 90 drive bays in it, which means that from them, the way they can configure it, you can get up to 900 terabytes of storage, or 9/10 of a petabyte, which is crazy. The configuration I have here, it does not have that. 89 of those 90 drive bays are empty. I put in one 1 terabyte drive just so that it has something to start with. But I think the idea behind this is that it's, well, let me list out the specs and you can kind of judge for yourself. So it's got a dual Xeon 3.5 gigahertz CPUs in it. I put in 8 gigs of DDR4 RAM. It has 2 mirrored operating system disks. So and it's 2 480 gigabyte SSD drives, which is more than enough for your operating system drives. Then they're mirrored for obvious reasons. And this is just basically, and that doesn't count against the 90 drive bays. So this is just separate OS disks. And it's running OS Nexus QuantaStore, which is, so you've got Linux, ZFS is the file system, and then a software-defined storage infrastructure on top of all that, which means you can do both block storage and file storage at the same time if you want, or independently. And this configuration is $24,790. So this is basically a gigantic NAS. Yeah, more of a SAN. It's basically a network attached storage device on mega crazy steroids with full software defined storage stack on it. It comes with basically a web configuration page, so you can configure the software defined storage things yourself, kind of with the web configuration tools. And it's just as absolutely crazy, all powered by Linux and open source and delightfulness. And man, it's just a beefy rig, but basically it's the most configuratable software-defined storage 90 drive bay thing I've ever seen. It's just absolutely phenomenal. And the folks over at Pogo Linux have engineers that can kind of walk you through like what the best way to configure it is and how to get it all set up just for you. So anyway, so that is the storage director Q4290. 4,290. I'm not sure how you say that exactly, but the Q4290. 90 drive bays. 90. I'm trying to think back over all the computers I've ever owned in my life if I've had a grand total of 90 drive bays. Over all of them. If I added all of them up, like from the 80s till today, maybe I've had 90 drive bays. total in my whole life. And I guarantee it goes nowhere close to 9/10 of a petabyte in total storage. That is absolutely, absolutely insane. So again, big thanks to both Pogo Linux and to System 76, pogolinux.com, system76.com, for supporting this show and making things like this Richard Stallman interview possible. I can't thank you crazy cats enough. You've really helped make this show what it is. And also, before we go any further, I need to make this very clear here. So this episode, we're interviewing Richard Stallman. Now, Richard has very strong opinions about YouTube. So, in respect for Richard Stallman, this episode will appear on YouTube, but, big but here. I am also putting this up, of course, DRM free in multiple formats over on archive.org. Now, if you are starting to watch this on YouTube and you're like, you know what, I want to respect what Richard Stallman's wishes would be, go over and watch it on archive.org, or you can go get the audio podcast feed version of this show over on patreon.com/Brian Lunduke. All my Patreon supporters get an audio RSS feed every day that's updated with all the shows. Or you can just go and watch it for free over on archive.org. I recommend you do that there. If you want to watch it here, I think that's fine because we're still getting the message of free software out there to the world. But I wanted to make that clear because I think that's really fundamentally important. And I think that would make Richard happy to encourage people to go use services like archive.org that are a little more freedom respecting than perhaps YouTube would normally be. All right. With all that said, here we go. Richard Stallman. Richard, thank you again for hanging out with us today. I want to dive right into it, and you can talk about anything else we want to talk about, but I would love to get your opinion on the current happenings with the W3C in regards to creating a DRM standard. All that's kind of going on right now. I know they're considering it, the current proposal and specification right now, and Tim Berners-Lee has kind of come out in support of having DRM as a standard from the W3C. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, anytime a land is menaced by a powerful empire, there are always and try to palliate the cruelty of the subsequent occupation and conquest. And if you don't see the conquest as really horrible, if you're inclined to give in and you can't beat them, you think, so join them. At least in the short term, you might say you can't beat them. In the long term, we can, you see.
Yes.
But the people who think short term will say, well, we can't beat them, let's join them. So they look for ways they can sign up as servitors of the conquerors, and they tell themselves that they will make the conquest less oppressive. But typically, they have more effect in their own minds than in reality, because the conquerors use them to get the jobs done that they were going to get done anyway. And if those people had refused to help, that wouldn't things would have gone more or less the same, except there'd be more opposition and better chance of ultimately throwing them out.
Yes.
So
that's
what's happening.
Fight against it. Sorry. Yes.
Hello. What's happening here is that Berners-Lee and Jeff Jaffe have convinced themselves that by making this a standard, they will make the injustice of DRM smoother and less annoying in minor ways.
Yes.
And they've convinced themselves that that's the purpose of their lives, to make injustice a little smoother in minor ways. But at the same time, if they manage to make the DRM more uniform And if they manage to make it more secure in some way, that will harm people because it will make it harder for some people to break the DRM. And that's the
Right.
only legitimate way to use a system with DRM is to break the DRM.
Right. If you were to give a suggestion to Tim Berners-Lee, Sir Tim Berners-Lee, who's a knight, what would it be?
Well, that doesn't
How
prove
should
he's any
he?
good. That proves the fact that he's a knight means he was of service to the empire.
That's actually a really good point.
And now he's being of service to another empire.
Oh, that's a really good point. But what do we suggest to Tim? How should he handle this?
He should handle it by saying no, but he can't really. And the reason is he set up an organization which is controlled by the businesses that want to put in the most money. And that basically tells Hollywood, here's your opportunity. Turn us into your tool. That's what the W3 has become, a tool for the businesses that will pay it the money.
Yeah, it kind of has, hasn't it? That's a sad state. I mean, they're supposed to be the defenders of some of our
They're not,
online freedoms.
well, they were, may have been, somebody may have wished they would be or thought they would be, but by structuring it so it's controlled by the businesses, they structured it so it wouldn't defend us from those businesses.
That is a very sad state of affairs. What do we do? What do people like me, average people out and about, what do we do to try and make a difference in this fight?
Well, the first thing is we've got to demand political change. Instead of the DMCA, which makes it a crime to show people how to break DRM, it should be a crime to make, import, or lease or sell devices with DRM.
Do you think that's
Both the
possible?
players, both the players and the media. It should be a crime.
I
So
agree.
the executives of the companies that are now pulling the strings of a W3C, they should go to jail for doing DRM. And is it possible? That's basically saying, should we give up in despair without fighting? Because that's what it is. You see, if you
Yes.
tell themselves, if people tell themselves we'll never win, then they won't fight, so they won't win. That's for sure. Whereas if they fight, then maybe eventually we'll win. It just takes enough people to fight. Uh, we've shown recently that we can stop particular activities proposed by the unjust ruling party, which is the plutocratic party, essentially. It's the party of uh, crush everyone who's not rich for the sake of the rich and manipulate people by uh, their vicarious desire to live through the rich and powerful to support these policies, never mind the fact that they're going to be crushed. But the fact is, they can't win enough support that way. And opposition is very strong. And some of what they've tried to do they've been forced to back off of. Of course, it's not easy. We're going to have to stop them from crushing women and sick people and minorities and those who aren't wealthy. We're going to have to keep fighting this way until we vote them out. But but the point is, we can do this with the DMCA also. It's just that we haven't mobilized enough people to do it because so many people have been convinced to ask themselves, is victory possible?
Yeah.
And they realize it's not easy. It takes a lot of people. And if they tell themselves, we'll never get enough people, and so they don't try, then the enemy wins.
We don't want the enemy to win here. So what is
That's one thing you can do. But
yeah.
the other thing you can do is reject products with DRM. Never use any product designed to restrict you unless you have immediately to hand what it takes to break the handcuffs. So it's okay to play a DVD if you have libDVD CSS, so you can break the DRM with free
So you
software.
can remove those
It's
shackles. Yeah.
right. But the point is that for each product, it's a different system of shackles, and what you need is something different. So, for instance, you shouldn't use a Blu-ray disc unless you have free software to hand that can play the Blu-ray disc, and you shouldn't use Netflix unless you have free software to hand that can play the stream from Netflix.
Interesting.
Of
Yeah.
course, you shouldn't use Netflix anyway because it identifies people and tracks what they watch, and it imposes an unjust contract that you should certainly never agree to.
Uh, right. That actually brings up a kind of an interesting side note here. When I told people that, I was going to be talking to you, a lot of people had questions for you, and it was all over the map. And a lot of it was just simply make sure to tell Richard thank you. So I need to relay the thank yous.
Well,
But
actually, I have a response to that.
yes,
The best way to thank me and the thousands of other people who've worked on GNU is by helping us advance. So look at gnu.org/help, and you'll see dozens of different kinds of work you can do or contributions you can make, and it's not all programming. Programming is just one way to help. So if you know you're not a great programmer and you don't think you could make a big contribution that way, do another one of the things we need, which need completely different skills. There are things in that list that you can do. So roll up your sleeves and work.
absolutely. Yeah, I know that there's documentation work, there's testing work, there's communication work, there's all sorts of
Oh,
things to do.
there's organizing work. There's helping various teams that do specific jobs. For instance, there are many many websites that have JavaScript on them. And in many cases, the JavaScript code was written for that organization. And all they have to do to make it free software is put a license on it. And all, and then they have to do it in a way that's machine recognizable so that LibreJS will recognize it.
Right.
And there are several ways to do that, and you can do it. So the point is, get it done. And we have teams of people who do that kind of help for various sites. There are lots of kinds of work that need doing. Some of it requires creativity, but not in software. Some of it doesn't require so much creativity. You just need to know what you're doing and you can do it. There's so many different ways to contribute to the cause.
Awesome. Awesome. Yes, definitely worth checking out.
So it's gnu.org slash
Slash
help.
help. Yep. Yep. I'll put a link to that up so everyone can see it as well. One of the questions I keep getting, and this sort of dovetails into what we were just talking about, is when you, Richard Stallman, are viewing entertainment stuff, music, movies, television, etc. How do you do it? How do you like to enjoy your entertainment? Do you?
Well, the crucial point is that no movie or show or song is worth giving up my freedom for. So I don't. So the
Fair.
only ways I will get copies of publications is when there's an ethical way to do it, one that doesn't mistreat me, doesn't do injustice to those who are using it. And there are three kinds of injustice to avoid. One is DRM. DRM that you know how to break, you can ignore, but otherwise
Right.
it's unacceptable. And I don't have any players that will play with DRM because I don't have any proprietary software and I hate DRM. So given that decision that I don't have anything that will play the things with DRM, basically I can only use the media without DRM. And I should point out that there is free software to play DVDs, and I don't see anything wrong with it. But since it's forbidden in the US,
Right.
and since I have enemies, I decided I'm better off not having a copy of anything to break uh, CSS. And so I just don't watch any, I don't have DVDs with DRM.
That's
Even
probably smart.
you could have them. You could, I see no reason you shouldn't install that free software and play DVDs through it. But for me, it's better not to have or play those DVDs.
Fair.
The next injustice is an EULA. I do not agree to EULAs.
Ever.
And this means ever. So this means I can't get music over the internet
Yeah.
because they oppose EULAs. I could buy a CD for the music, and I do that, but I won't get the same music as a file if I have to agree to an EULA. When you buy a
Right.
CD, you don't agree to any license.
Right. You're just
All
buying a
there is
physical product. Yeah.
exactly. It, likewise, I won't get ebooks if they have EULAs or DRM.
Interesting.
And the third thing is tracking. The third injustice that you typically find when publications are offered over the internet is some kind of tracking and surveillance. Now, I hate surrendering to an injustice. It wouldn't, which books I read, which music I listen to, it's not really a secret that I'm concerned that it would endanger me if anyone knew. That's not the point. The
Right.
point is I want to fight surveillance. I don't want to give in.
Right.
And if I got a publication in a way that tracked me, I'd be giving in.
Yes.
I'd be
Yes.
surrendering where
Absolutely.
I could have resisted. So I buy music in CDs from physical stores. I don't see anything wrong in selling the music that way. There's no injustice, so why not? If I want the music, if I want enough to pay, then
Then
I
you
buy
buy
it.
it. Buy what?
Yeah, the problem is there are in the US it's hard to find such stores anymore. The only
It is
ones
getting
I
harder.
the only big record stores I know of in the US are Amoeba and Rasputin in Berkeley and one Amoeba also in San Francisco. So when I go out there, I go to those.
Yeah.
I look for CDs to buy.
And I have to ask because otherwise I'll never hear the
Other
end of
than
it.
that,
Yeah. Go ahead.
other than that, the only copies of music that are being offered in a way that doesn't do injustice to you are the unauthorized copies.
Right. Right. And I know there are kind of free music projects online where you can get, music where it's given by the creators, explicitly offered up with no DRM of any kind. And those are sorts of
But they may
services.
track you. The problem is they may track you. And so I wouldn't use them.
Gotcha.
And I'd be happy if I could anonymously send money from time to time to artists. I but you can't do that with Flatter because the only way to pay money to Flatter is identifying yourself.
That is true.
And not only that, the site I believe depends on non-free JavaScript code and I refuse to run that. Now they could fix that. They could make it free. They could make the site work with no JavaScript, with JavaScript disabled, that is, as an
Right.
option for the user. But now I might be misremembering this because it was some time ago that I looked at these things. I'm pretty sure you have to identify yourself. I'm not so sure of my memory about the JavaScript code.
Yeah.
So if I'm mistaken, I hope you'll tell me and the public.
Someone will let us
But
know. Yes.
yeah, the point is, though, their goal is good, but the means do an injustice. They've got to fix their means.
What's the right
But
way
in
to
any
do that?
case,
Yeah, wait, go ahead. Go ahead.
it's there's nothing wrong with sharing copies of music.
Right. If
There are it's not even a crime, by the way, to to make a copy of a piece of music and offer it to your friend
Right. The crime
or a stranger.
is that there's the DMCA, and so if you break DRM, then you're in violation of the DMCA, and that is
Right.
the
Well, there's
crime.
nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong about breaking DRM.
Right.
Unfortunately, because businesses write the laws, because of the power of money in politics, businesses get to write laws, but that doesn't give those laws any moral authority. There's nothing wrong about breaking DRM. There's nothing wrong about publishing code to break DRM. It's just that you have an unjust government trying to stop you.
Right. It's not an unethical thing to remove restrictions from a file. I mean, it's just you utilizing a file that you already have. I mean, it
Right,
just
and
makes sense.
there's nothing wrong about sharing. On the contrary, we have to completely and conclusively legalize sharing copies of published works, of any published work. And when I say sharing, I mean something specific. I mean non-commercial
Right.
redistribution of exact copies. That's what has to be legalized. So I am not saying to abolish copyright. I'm saying to carve out something that is fundamental to society and therefore must be permitted.
I totally agree. When you do, Richard Stallman, get a physical CD of music, what are you listening to, my friend? People want to know this. People have asked me repeatedly what
You mean
music.
what kinds of what?
Yeah.
Oh,
What sort of bands
well,
do you listen to?
I like many kinds of music,
What do you like?
but most of them are not popular, not successful in the US.
Well, that's okay.
Well,
Give us an example. What are you listening to the most right now? What's your
well,
favorite
what I've been listening
jam?
to a few times the past few days is a collection of CDs called from Spain, I believe, called El Latido de la Memoria. And I don't know why it's called that. It's a strange, it's the beating of the memory. Uh, why? But uh, in any case, the music on it, which uh, is more or less traditional
Yeah.
from various places in Spain, mostly, is really beautiful.
Oh, that's excellent. Yeah, people are curious. I think people have seen all of the things you've done over the years, and you've championed uh, general freedom so much that you've become a bit of an icon. And when people look at you, they wonder, what's he listen to when he's out and about and by himself? What music is he listen to?
Uh,
What movies does he
on
watch?
Monday, I went to a concert
Yeah,
of gamelan music from Java.
I have never heard that at all. I,
Well, I'm sure you can find
I'm
some.
sure I can. That sounds very cool. That's very cool. Gamelan music from Java. I'll have to look that up. People are just extremely curious. Do you? And this may be a silly question in some ways, but do you watch TV at all?
I don't have a TV. When I was a teenager and before that, when I was a child, I was a TV addict. When I moved away to college, I decided to go cold turkey.
That was probably a good move.
A few years after that, while I was still at college, my father offered to give me a TV set, and I said, "I'm a TV addict in recovery. I shouldn't have a TV set."
That's probably smart. I'm still up to my eyeballs in TV. I haven't yet broken that monkey off of my back. When you were a teenager, before you quit and became a recovered TV addict, what was your favorite show? What was just the show of your youth?
Well, I wouldn't want to talk about that because I don't think my tastes mostly were very well developed.
That's
But
fair.
I did love The Prisoner.
Oh yeah, good show. Yeah, yeah. All right. Hey, no disagreement there. That's a good
A
one.
few, it turns out, I think a few of the episodes are good and most of them are not very good. But the few that are good,
It's
I
worth
really
it.
like.
Yeah, it was worth
And
wading through.
uh, I'm going to escape and come back and wipe this place off the face of the earth is an inspiration to me. You might say that spirit is the base of the free software movement. I'm going
Interesting.
to escape from proprietary software and come back and wipe proprietary software off the face of the earth.
So
I
we,
don't know if that will get done within my lifetime, but that's the aim.
hey,
Proprietary
making good
software is an
progress.
injustice. Proprietary software is an injustice because it's controlled by one entity, the proprietor, often the developer, not always. And it gives that proprietor power over every user. That is the fundamental injustice of proprietary software. That's why I refuse to use it. That's why it should not exist. It must not exist.
How how do you feel that fight has gone so far? Like when you look back over from the, the 80s and 90s and 2000s, how do you feel that's progressed?
Well, we keep advancing, but new areas of computing keep arising, which are totally uh, zones of enslavement, of subjugation. So, what you can do with free software keeps growing. There are areas such as, for instance, graphic design and animation that nowadays you can do reasonably well with free software,
Yeah. This show
according to some people in the
entirely built
field.
and done in free software. We're using free software to record every last scrap of this. So it is amazing what we've accomplished.
But at the same time, most people who use the internet are using disservices, which basically exploit them to get their personal information.
Yes.
And even if you're using a free browser to talk to them, they're still mistreating you. No, nobody uses Facebook. Facebook uses them. Facebook doesn't have users; it has useds. And if you have a Facebook account, Facebook is using you to get personal data about you and about other people you know, and that's dangerous to the danger has gone to the point where they may be able to control elections or sell someone else the data to do so. It's now beyond the point of being a threat to the individuals that are used. So you really had better not be a used of Facebook. That's why at the beginning of every talk I give, I tell people not to put photos of me into Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp because those are three tentacles of the same company.
So just stay out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Don't touch it. But especially not to put photos of me into it. Because if they did that, then Facebook could recognize me through face recognition and they'd be helping Facebook track me.
Right.
So, yes, I hope you won't let yourself be tracked. That's because you also deserve privacy. But please, even if you're going to mistreat yourself, please don't mistreat me.
Yeah, don't mistreat other people. Don't make that decision for someone else.
Right. Don't ever put any information about another person into Facebook at the very least. If you haven't yet developed the strength to escape from its mistreatment yourself, at least don't drag others into it.
Right.
Don't ask people to talk with you through Skype. Skype is non-free software and it can only talk to non-free software.
Right. It's closed.
So if you, well, I don't like the words open and closed in this area.
Sure.
The crucial point is it's a non-free program and it has a network effect. So people keep telling me, yes, I feel I can't stop using Skype because those other people I know are pressuring me to use it. But if you're saying that, that means you're pressuring other people to keep using it. So everyone that uses Skype is, first of all, a victim.
Right.
And second of all, through the network effect, a co-perpetrator. They are victim co-perpetrators. That's the way to understand what the network effect does when an unjust communications tool is used.
Right. Yeah, the more people that are using it, it just exponentially grows because they pull their friends in, they pull their families in.
Exactly, except when someone resists on principle,
Right.
such as me. That's why I absolutely refuse to talk with people through Skype, even if it were running on someone else's computer.
That's fair and reasonable. What do you have a instant messaging or chat
No,
network that you like?
no. I don't use them because they're not convenient for me.
Fair.
Some of them are ethically okay, but they don't work for me because most of the time I don't have a a network connection, and I'm too busy. So
Fair.
I need to do it through email.
Gotcha.
Email is my messenger. And the point of it is it's not instant.
It's not, but it's kind of nice in that way. There's something nice about getting an email, being able to think about it and replying at your leisure. Like that's a nice thing
Right.
to be able to do. Um,
So I don't use any of those instant messengers, chat networks, social networks, but I'm not saying they're all bad. They're all different.
yeah,
Each one has its own characteristics, both ethically and practically, and therefore I don't make general statements about social networks.
fair enough. I know. I've asked people. I've been using Mastodon a lot lately, which is kind of an offshoot of of Status and the GNU social side of things, and people on there were like, "Man, when could we get Richard Stallman over on here?" So that gives a pretty good answer to that, I think.
Uh, I'm I'm currently having people look at Mastodon for me to make a judgment of what we should say about it.
Fair, absolutely fair. I've been kind
The
of
one thing
researching it
is,
myself.
well, I hope you'll email me info about what you find.
Will do.
It appears to be free software, so that's the most important question. It sounds like they don't talk very much about freedom.
No,
They appear not to be champions of freedom.
no. They
I
per,
wish they were.
yeah. Yeah, the more the better, right? They have been doing free software, and that's great. But I don't know if
Yeah.
they talk about it much.
Well, maybe if someone can put me in touch with them, I can ask them to do so. I mean, what we do matters. How we do the things we do matters. That affects people directly. What we say is important also. If people develop a program that's free, then okay, it respects your freedom. So if it's convenient, you should use it. But if they will also talk about freedom and say we're releasing it this way because that respects freedom, then they help in a second way, and we need more of that.
Absolutely, absolutely. What just to change kind of topics perhaps for a second. Right now, what is your focus lately? Like there's always new things coming on. There's a new assault from a different DRM thing over
I
here, and
don't have a focus like that. I'm always in the middle of working on many things.
fair.
Sometimes articles and interviews are part of it, and then also I'm going around speaking. My work is not technical these days. I was involuntarily self-promoted into management.
How has that gone for you? Do you how so I haven't coded much in quite a few years for a similar reason. I just kind of my work trajectory took me out of coding, and I've just recently found that I'm starting to miss it quite a lot. Do you ever get that urge to go back there and just sit in a dark room and code for a weekend?
Well, I don't call it coding, I call it programming. And the reason is uh, coding, in the meaning I understand, is the low level parts of programming.
Ah, fair.
So when I talk about doing the whole job, I call it programming. And that's what I say. I don't say I'm a coder, I say I'm a programmer,
Fair.
or was a programmer, because now that's not what I do anymore. But it's fun. the thing is, there are now so many people working on free programs that if I started a project, by the time I got it done, someone else would probably have written one.
That's kind of true in a way. Uh,
So I focus on doing something that there are not a lot of other people doing. And we desperately need more. We need more people to speak about free software and champion it
yes.
in a firm way and say, we've got to keep fighting because surrender leads to defeat.
Right? Never give up, but
Surrender,
never surrender.
surrender guarantees defeat.
Right? If you
If
don't
you keep
surrender, at least there's a
fighting,
chance.
exactly.
Yeah.
I hope, were you just quoting Galaxy
I
Quest? I hope
was.
not.
I was totally quoting Galaxy Quest. That is one of my
By the way,
my guilty pleasures in life.
you still see my video moving because yours has frozen.
You are moving and you look fine. Yes.
Okay. Oh, because mine is frozen for
Oh,
me. If it's working for you, that's good enough. I still hear you speaking, so everything's actually working. Although
things are
uh,
yes. We've got good
everything
audio.
that matters is working.
Everything that we're good. Yes. Yes, we're okay. But by the way,
By the way,
yeah, go ahead.
it's a lot of fun on many levels.
I'm sorry. Jitsi finally caught up. It fixed itself. Could you repeat that last thing you said? It cut out for a second.
Oh, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I totally agree.
It's fun on many levels too. So
Yeah, a guilty pleasure, but it makes me very happy. um, what have you got coming up over the next couple weeks and months? I assume you've got more speaking and the like and whatnot. Oh dear. Connectivity issues, always problematic. Dear, dear, dear. We're losing it. Can we get it back? Hey,
do you
there we
read me?
are. I do. I do.
Okay.
Welcome back.
My browser crashed. It's
I,
back now.
that's delightful. Stuff like that happens.
Yeah.
So
I
over
now have to, I'm elevating my computer to help it stay cool.
that's all right.
If it overheats, it might crash. I have a fan blowing on it also.
What sort of computer are you running right now?
I'm using a ThinkPad X60,
Nice.
which is one of the models of computer that can run a free BIOS with no binary blobs in the BIOS or in
Awesome.
Linux, no proprietary software in at any level of the GNU system, and so this is basically what we're aiming for since uh, 34 years ago.
That's amazing. What sort of what operating system are you running on there? I assume is it
Well, of
Triskel
course,
or
it's
yeah,
GNU/Linux.
of
That's the
course.
system I'm running, and the distro I'm running is Triskel.
Triskel. Nice. Very nice.
Triskel is one of the free distros that we endorse. Now, in order for us to endorse a distro, it has to be entirely free software. But
Right.
beyond that, the developers have to commit to removing non-free software if they find it. Because nobody's perfect, and there's so much stuff in a
Mistakes
distro
happen. Sure.
nowadays
Yeah.
that they can't promise never to make a mistake. So they have to promise that they will fix any mistakes that show up.
I like that. That's a really reasonable approach to it. Yeah, that's the right way. Um, um,
By the way, if you want to see what our policies are for endorsing distros, look at gnu.org/distros.
nice.
But we also endorse computer products now, peripherals and computers. And we call that the Respect Your Freedom certificate. And the X60 was being sold basically a refurbished X60 where
Right.
they would install the free software and ship it to you. This was being sold with our certification, although nowadays they've advanced to newer models of ThinkPads that they can also certify.
That's excellent. That's kind of the next step for me here as well. It's getting down there so that my machines don't have a non-free BIOS. That's kind of my final
So
step.
look at fsf.org/resources/HW for information about these endorsed products and other ways of selecting hardware for free software. So you
It's
can
awesome.
see we're advancing in various directions. And yet you look at all those mobile devices that
Yes.
that are full of peripherals that require non-free software at the system level.
Yeah.
So there's no way to free them and have them work
None.
except lots of painstaking reverse engineering, which is proceeding slowly.
Yeah. It just yes. It seems like there's such a market opportunity just looking at it from a purely capitalistic money making venture
Well, the
for
problem
to target
is
people like
with
us.
the levels of manufacturing make it hard because those that make tablets or phones have to use the chips that are available. And nowadays, those that make the chips use circuit designs that they only license, and they don't even know how to write programs to talk to those circuits.
Right.
So if you get an ARM chip these days, it's likely to come with a graphics processor. And the only way to find out how to use that graphics processor is reverse engineering, and the chip manufacturer doesn't know. The chip manufacturer doesn't have a choice except to include that graphics processor or not.
That is a sorry state. It's
So I would recommend a law requiring anyone that sells a product or leases a product to provide instructions about how to control it. Now, this is crucial also to make the Internet of Things a little less dangerous. I personally wouldn't tolerate anything in my home that was talking to the internet except for my computer
right. Or
because they're designed to mistreat you.
right.
And part of the way they're designed to mistreat you is that they contain non-free software. And as happens often in the non-free software world, they have malicious functionalities such as they talk to a server, and if you want to control them, you got to talk through the server. Well, that's a backdoor. That's malicious.
Right. That's
It's the act of folly to use such a device. At least cut it off from communication, break its antenna.
right. Even if the companies that produce it aren't intending to be malicious, even if their intent is let's produce something that we feel will be easy to use, in the end, by doing that, they make it so it's the product not only is more difficult to use and intentionally is much more hackable and vulnerable, but has a finite lifespan then because surely those services will not last
Well,
forever.
of course, planned obsolescence is a standard strategy.
It seems
You're
to have gotten
bending too
worse.
far backwards to give them the benefit of an unreasonable doubt. There is no doubt that proprietary software companies consider malicious functionalities as standard practice,
Yeah.
that they have no scruples about this. If any proprietary program nowadays has no malicious functionality, that's basically luck. So, what are the malicious functionalities that they typically put in? Surveillance,
Yeah.
DRM,
Oh yeah.
backdoors, censorship, tethering to a remote server.
There's just
Many
so
of them
much.
have universal backdoors. They can remotely change the code. which means they can wipe the floor with the user at any time in any way.
Right?
So,
Yes.
look, there was a product, uh, there was a cooking product. It cooks things. It's used for cooking things that was designed to be computer controlled from an app. And users were using it and it seemed to work okay. And then they were surprised to discover that suddenly it said, you need to make an account on our server to keep using this product.
To keep cooking.
Apparently, yeah, apparently the software had been changed. Now, one thing I don't know is whether the users were asked whether to upgrade the software.
Right.
I have a suspicion that they were not, because universal backdoors, also known as auto upgrade, are quite common, and people who ignore the question of freedom frequently say they're a good thing. It will make sure that the users get the benefit or detriment of any of the latest upgrades and downgrades.
Right.
Well, in that product, they got a downgrade.
It's amazing.
But
Yeah. Go ahead.
but even if the users were asked whether to install this downgrade,
Exactly.
if they were not explicitly told what it would do, that was
That's
a
just as
direct
sneaky.
abuse.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing is, ultimately, proprietary software is always an injustice because you can't change it yourself.
This is
You,
exactly
with free
right.
software, you can remove any malicious functionality, and it doesn't have to be you personally. A few other users can get together and do it and release their modified version, and you just have to use it.
Right?
So with free software, the community of users can defend itself from malicious functionalities. With proprietary software, the users are defenseless. This is why the mere fact of being proprietary software is an injustice. See gnu.org/philosophy/free software even more important.html.
Awesome. Awesome. I'll add that
The
link in as
only
well.
known def- the only known defense against malware is free software.
That's it. I mean, there's no other possibility unless we can see the code and verify it and change it
And
ourselves.
change it,
Yeah.
and change it collectively too, because if each user has to remove the malicious functionality personally, then A, that's a lot of redundant work, and B, the non-programmers are left out. They don't know how to fix it themselves. But with free software, we also have collective control over the program. A group of users can make a corrected version, and others can simply use that version. They don't need to know how to fix it personally, each one.
Exactly. Exactly.
So free software doesn't guarantee there are no malicious functionalities, but it gives us a defense against them. The defense doesn't work completely automatically. It's not a guarantee, but at least it's a defense.
It's a big
With
step in the
proprietary
right
software,
direction.
exactly. With proprietary software, the users are defenseless. They're helpless under the boot of the proprietor.
Exactly. They're
So the way you should boot proprietary software is out of your life.
with a big steel toed boot, preferably.
Yeah.
There are many, like, people have been talking a lot about, end-to-end encryption and chat clients and whatnot, and there have been several interesting implementations that have come up. There's Signal and Wire and various other things, and a lot of us have been pushing some of them because they haven't
Signal
had.
has some problems.
Yes, because
Signal has some problems.
we're not entirely open and free software either, and when you're talking security, you can't be assured of that. Just like you're saying, unless it is free software, unless we have the opportunity to not just look at it and analyze it, but to make changes ourselves to meet our own needs. And luckily, some of them, like Wire, are doing that, where they're releasing their source code for the server under free software licenses and the like. So we're seeing some good progress there, but there's still a big ways to go. Richard, I know you're a hungry man, and I want to let you go really quickly. I have one final question for you. If, right now today, the countries of the world banded together and passed a unanimous law outlawing all proprietary software and made free software the de facto, what would you then do with the remainder of your days?
Well, first of all, I don't advocate making all proprietary software as such illegal.
Fair.
There shouldn't be any proprietary software. Uh, it's harmful to people, sort of the way cocaine and meth are. But you know what the war on drugs does? Just making a dangerous drug illegal doesn't get rid of the problems. So while I hope everyone will avoid using proprietary software, just as I hope they'll avoid using meth, prohibiting it is not such a good solution.
Fair.
We've got to teach people to get off of it. In any case, if we solve the problem, get rid of the injustice of proprietary software, what would I do?
Yeah.
Well, if there are still other injustices in the world, I'm sure I'll be able to make some contribution to putting an end to them.
I should hope so. Well, Richard, thank you again, my friend. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and keep doing the good work you're doing, man.